I've always been curious about Guin's Saga. So let's jump right into Book 1, Chapter 1. First there's this line here. It was Yarn the destiny weaver, that guided their actions, yet they could not see the threads of fate upon which they walked. They did not know. From the Book of Island. Okay. Northern Mongol. That reminds me of something. Staphylos, Roodwood, Alien, Talus, Nosferus, the River Kes, Tauride, Taupo, Taurus, Gyro. Kind of like a coastal county. Chapter 1 is the Spirit Wood. Prologue. Okay. Freakish it was. To call it peculiar was to deny the sheer bizarreness of the thing. But there, bizarre too fell short. Freakish was all one could say, though the word hardly described the shock, the terror of seeing it. For a while now, which is to say for most of half a day, the thing had lain there on its side. It did not move, but lay crumpled like a corpse, stricken and discarded. Yet it lived. For now and then its four limbs that lay stretched out on the ground would shudder, but develop muscles twitching as if in seizure. But that was the only sign. The place where it lay was covered in silence that seemed eternal. The stillness was near complete. Evening was close, and the sun had waxed to a gigantic disk that shone with a dull hard light as it dipped low towards the mountains. Had any man come wandering here this evening, and seen the thing laying there, with its head half in the waters of the spring, he would have known fear that gripped him and would not let go, that made his legs go weak. Doubts would have raced through his mind. Perhaps he had broken some sacred taboo. Perhaps by seeing this thing he was overstepping the boundaries that protected a safe, sane world that he had taken for granted. But in truth, none of sound mind would come here in deepening twilight, for these were the lands of Staphylos Keep. These were the borderlands between the domain of men and the darker regions where darker things ran wild. As freakish as the fallen creature was, he had the shape of a man. Still, few would venture calling it such. Except for a crude leather loincloth, he was naked. Its powerful body exposed, sculpted by training, hardened by battle. That body shook again, unconsciously gripped by equal amounts of thirst and pain. Slowly reached out his hands, caked with residues of blood and scored with countless battle scars. Slowly they stretched toward the spring water that gurgled from the ground and spread into a beckoning pool. The creature's hands broke the surface of the spring, palms cupped to scoop out water and lifted, trembling, to the mouth. The thing, or perhaps it was a he, was terribly thirsty. So thirsty that if he did not drink, he would surely die. Yet drink he could not. His hands brought the water to his mouth, and there it stopped. 2 times he tried. The water reached his lips but went no further. A third time he strained, and the water ran from his shuddering fingers and slid down his chin, while thirst raged in his throat. A noise escaped his lips then, like the howl of a wounded, dying animal. The chilling cry shook the pool and stirred the bushes at the edges of the spring, where small creatures, probably the winged Taurus, half bird, half beast, took to the air in fright. He reached out his hands toward the water a final time, and his strength left him. The hands dropped to the ground. Convulsions shook his frame, and he collapsed. Soon he became as still as he had been before. Wind blew, rustling the grass, sending ripples across the surface of the spring. A grass viper's shining crimson eyes peered inquisitively from the underbrush for a moment, and then vanished. Above, vampire vines came snaking down from the tops of strangely hued, misshapen trees. Yet he, or maybe it wasn't it after all, lay still on the ground, unaware of these things. There it lay on the ground by the spring, sprawled out in all its freakishness, unmoving, and defenseless. 1. Rinda. Rinda. A shrill voice called out, Rinda, Rinda. Why not just Linda? Why Rinda? The boy had meant to whisper, but his voice rang out clear and loud, echoing through the vast grim silence of the forest. Shh! Be quiet! Came Younger's sharp reply from the foliage nearby. Remus stuck out his lower lip in a pout, but the unseen Linda was far from finished with him. Really? Is that cotton you've got between your ears? Have you forgotten where we are? But, her brother began. The Rootwood. Her voice came again, cutting him off. In the lands of the tyrant king of Gora. Sheol-Gora? But Rinda, he continued, slowly craning his neck out of the bushes to look around. I thought you'd gone and left me. It's all right anyway. I think those riders have left. Rinda's head slowly emerged from the bushes a short distance away. She checked to make sure the horsemen really had gone past them without her brother's unfortunate display catching their attention. Finding that all was quiet around them, she slowly began the difficult and painful process of extricating herself from the shrubbery. Wow. The bushes were those of the Vassia, known for its delectable fruit and for the uninviting thorns that bristled from its leaves and even from its fruit. How are you gonna eat the fruit with fucking thorns? Rinda took the utmost care in pushing them aside, stretching out her slender white arms to hold down the thorny stalks as she wormed her way out of her hiding place. First her shiny platinum blonde hair, then her slender bare shoulders, then her delicate undeveloped torso, and finally her legs long and slim like a boy's in tall leather boots, emerged from the thorny hiding place where they had spent most of a day and a night. Ah! There isn't a bit of me that isn't positively prickling with pain. She shook herself and began to stretch her cramped limbs, but a little cry from her brother interrupted her long-awaited exercise. She ran over to find that he was having considerably more difficulty than she had in extracting himself from his uncomfortable nest. He was fighting a losing battle against the thorn-covered leaves and stalks that caught on the soft skin of his hands and legs, leaving cruel trails wherever they touched. Can you do nothing right? The way you're thrashing about, you'd think you wanted to cover yourself with scratches. Rinda showed no restraint in her criticism. What a snappy girl, as she helped him to his feet and deftly plucked out the vassia twigs tangled in the boy's platinum blonde hair. Everyone's blonde in this world. Of course. Medieval Europe. Everyone is blonde in medieval Europe, or are they? Standing there, the hands joined, the two looked amazingly alike, which was not surprising since there were twins. And you only tell me this now? There in the shadowy undergrowth of the forest, they shone like two perfect pearls, with their matched leather jerkins and leather boots and their silver short swords hanging from their belts. They had the same braided platinum blonde hair, the same beautiful face. Rinda is intent and spirited. Her brother is innocent and carefree, and the same mischievous violet eyes. They were like two sylvan spirits, so beautiful it was a shame no one was there to see them. The twins themselves, however, could not care less about appearances at the moment. Indeed, they were perfectly happy not to be seen. Remus rubbed his hands and legs where the thorns had left him with more scratches than skin. As soon as he was on his feet, he began whining. This guy. Rinda, what do we do now? I'm starving. Rinda turned her attention to the gear at her waist. Next to the short sword, a soft leather satchel hung on a thick leather belt. But even after a careful scrutiny of its contents, she could find nothing that seemed useful in their current situation. Well, I didn't think of bringing any traveling food with everything that was going on. It's a miracle I brought anything at all. So let's hunt. Perhaps we can catch something to eat. I think not. We haven't come to the Rootwood for a summer picnic, Remus. How many times must I tell you? We can't be running about chasing after animals. You know what will happen should someone from Staphylos keep discover us? Even if we did catch something, we wouldn't be able to light a fire to cook it. You're welcome to eat raw Talos innards if you wish, but I'll pass, thank you very much. But I'm so hungry, I could faint. You're not the only one, Rinda seemed on the verge of another scathing critique, but she suddenly broke off and looked around. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" "Hoofbeats. The riders are coming back." Rinda shushed her brother before he could protest, and dove, or dived, whatever you want to say, man, and dove back into the Vazia thicket, heedless now of the clinging thorns. Though any who beheld her would have seen the promise of a dazzlingly beautiful woman, a few years were all that she lacked. She was not yet of an age to worry about her beauty or about preserving the rare softness of her skin. "Remus, quick!" Rinda hissed to her brother, who was still standing quizzically cupping a hand to one ear. "Why would you even do—" he was trying to hear. He turned and made to crawl into the thicket, but too late. The overgrown track that passed through the forest had... Wait a minute. The overgrown track that passed through the forest, hard by the thicket where the twins had been hiding, was suddenly filled with the pounding hoofs of a squad of black-garbed riders. Their leader, the black plume atop his black helm fluttering in the wind, barked a sharp order through his faceplate, and the riders drew up and leapt from their horses in unison. All wore the same black helms and black cloaks, with faceplates down and great broadswords slung across their backs. "Remus, run!" Rinda screamed. Remus had given up trying to force his way back into the thicket, and instead turned and dashed for the woods, but one of the riders, moving swiftly, grabbed his slender arm in a grip like a vice. "Are they actually looking for them, then?" "Let me go!" Remus screamed and struggled. His small face shone with a kind of prideful rage that only the most noble of blood and heart can muster. The rider with the black plume gave another sharp order. "Get them!" he said. "Get them!" Fought Rinda. "What? What do you mean, fought Rinda? What are you talking about?" The language he spoke was not foreign to the twins, but the accent was too thick that it took her a considerable amount of effort to decipher the meaning. Remus screamed even louder as the other riders approached the Vazia thicket. Heedless of the thorny bar into which Rinda had worn her way, a hand sheathed in a gauntlet of cold iron reached in to snatch her as she clawed and twisted like an angry kitten. Now wait a minute. Heedless of the thorny bar. Oh, okay. Her captor seemed oblivious to Rinda's screams at the thorns that caught on her skin and in the hair. He dragged her roughly from the thicket, and she tumbled out onto grass where she caught her breath in ragged gasps, tears welling in her eyes from the scratches covering her body and face. "Barbarians! Beasts! Terrorists! Swine of Gora!" Rinda's deep violet eyes blazed with anger. "Why are you doing this? You Goran dogs have taken everything from us. May Janus's bolt strike you and turn you to ash." The black-cloaked riders looked down coldly at the girl, whose slender body shook now as her tears of pain turned to tears of rage. The captain laughed harshly, then suddenly stepped forward. With his iron-gloved hand, he grabbed her chin and looked at her face. His intent was clear. "Let her go!" Remus shouted and strained against his captors, but their hands held him fast. Recoiling, Rinda spat at the mask covering the leader's face. But then in one swift motion, leapt deftly out of his grasp, and drew the short sword from the sheath at her waist. Finally! Didn't think to use the swords before. Then again, they're just kids. She crouched like a mountain cat, fierce and proud. But her sword, a finely ornamented thing wrought of silver, was too slender to seem a threat. The men guffawed, and cheered her on as their captain gave a guttural laugh and strode boldly toward her. Rinda raised her sword and drew back. The black rider closed in. She stepped back again, but this time her foot caught on a tangle of weeds. "You can't do anything right!" She yelped and fell backwards, and the black rider leapt atop her. "Rinda!" The girl heard her brother scream as strong hands pinned her down to the ground. She fought wildly, with all her heart, struggling to get free, but her strength and her will were nearly exhausted. "Rinda! Come on, dude, say something else!" Remus screamed again and squirmed, trying to wrench out of the rider's steel grip, and then everything stopped. Tokyo tomatta. There was a sudden silence so complete that Remus could hear the breath catch in his captor's throat. The captain rolled off of Rinda and froze. Beneath his faceplate, his eyes were wide with disbelief and terror. Rinda cried out weakly, but that sound too vanished into the overwhelming silence that had swooped upon the glade. The glade. Let's see the exact meaning of this word here, because I'm not sure. I know it's a place, like a freaking plain or something, but let's just see. An open space in the forest, yeah. So that's what it means. Interesting. That's a good word to have in your vocabulary. Anyways, slowly, something had stepped from the shade of the trees and begun walking toward them. The way it walked, with both arms stretched out before it like a mindless zombie, feeling its way along, spoke somehow of things more horrible than death. Its steps were unsteady, yet, as it approached, its gait became increasingly stable and determined. "What may it be?" spoke a rider unconsciously, his voice trembling. "'Tis a root demon, a walking corpse, a monster." A wave of fear rippled through the men. It was as if a nightmare had crept out of the darkest corner of their superstitious minds and was now stalking quietly through the gloom of the trees. It was coming for them. "Janus! Mercy!" One of the weak of heart shouted a prayer and bolted towards his horse. The sudden movement broke the spell holding the riders. They tossed Remus aside and made a mad dash for their steeds. "Hold! Who gave orders to mount?" "Hoo! Ahoo!" The captain shouted in wild frustration. He was nearly dumb with fear. He was nearly dumb. He became more intelligent, but he was nearly dumb. And his hands shook. But he was their leader, and he had not forgotten his duty. Rinda moved swiftly. As soon as the grip on her arm relaxed, she pulled away and dashed toward her brother. "Wait!" the captain called out. He took a step to follow her, momentarily forgetting the freakish horror and his chagrin at letting the girl go. And there it is. You actually have some actual illustrations here then, eh? What the hell is this thing? Looks like just a man covered with a hood. Simple as fuck. "You! Get them! The twins of Paris must not..." His voice broke off in mid-order. The fiend's outstretched hand had yanked him backward by the black plume atop his helmet. Its two giant hands then closed upon his throat. He yelped and twisted to draw the sword at his waist, but it was barely halfway out of his scabbard when the man's neck broke with a wet popping sound. The leader's head was now hanging backward in an unnatural angle in the powerful hands of the thing. "Captain!" The riders stopped in their tracks. Though fear had nearly robbed them of their wits, these were trained soldiers, not a band of cowering children. Seeing their leader fall broke the spell of fear. "Are you guys dumb? Now that he dies, you fuckers wanna fight? You fucking crazy. You insane cowards." They turned from their horses, drew their swords, and moved to surround the creature. A strange menacing sound, like the howl of an animal, came from the creature's mouth. One of the riders leapt forward, his sword blade slashing down. His sword blade. I've never seen that before. His sword blade. It's either his sword or his blade, not his sword blade. Whatever, man, whatever. The creature lifted the captain's body and blocked the swinging blade. The battle was joined. At once the wood was filled with cries and shouts, and the clanging of blades and armor. The twins of Paris had been completely forgotten. Indeed, the twins themselves had forgotten to escape, and instead stood frozen with fear, watching the strange struggle unfold before them. Side by side they held hands, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. Just days before, they had witnessed a battle on a much greater scale, the hellish pandemonium that had led to their exile in this backwater province. Then too they had stood watching, holding hands as they did now. But even the defense of Paris, bitterly fought against the Goran invaders, could not compare to the bizarre conflict going on here deep in the rootwood. "Rinda," Remus whispered, bewitched by the scene before him, his entire body shaking, making jumbles of his words. What could it be, that thing?" How should I know? Rinda's teeth chattered, and only with a great deal of effort was she able to croak out an answer at all. I think it's the evil one, Dole himself. Oh, gods help us. The words spilled unbidden from the boy's lips. Before his eyes, the man-thing was dancing between the blades of 10 seasoned swordsmen. He, moved with steps that seemed far too light for his great mass, and slowly but surely he was killing the men. The strange being's only weapons were his preternatural strength and the captain's body. He's using it as a freaking weapon, which he swung in deadly arcs like a great armored bludgeon. Already 3 of the riders had fallen, heads smashed by their own leader's corpse. 2 more had broken arms. And still they do not flee. It is Dole. He is. He has the strength of a god, said Linda. Remus looked at his sister in surprise. She was entranced, almost in rapture, watching the macabre dance. Why doesn't he pick up one of their swords and use that instead of the captain? Because it's more fun this way. Why, Remus? Why, God? She exclaimed. Indeed, she seemed almost on the verge of running in to counsel him on his choice of weapons. Use this! You're not doing it right. You can't do anything right? When the creature spun the body around and threw it like a missile, knocking 2 of the riders flat. The remaining 3 looked around and despaired. Finally. One of the men, his ears ringing with the screams of his fellows. Why are you guys screaming? You're only friggin' distracting me. Stop screaming and just fight. And his feet sliding on the battle-slick ground, flew into a blind rage and hurled himself forward as best he could, sword raised toward his foe. The creature slipped past the blade and grabbed him, hugged him around the torso with arms as big as an average man's thighs. The rider screamed like one caught in the embrace of a great snake. His screams did not stop until his spine broke, armor and all. Then almost casually, the man-thing relaxed his grip. To left, breathed Linda. Is this a game to you? Get behind him, yelled one of the 2 remaining soldiers. There are only 2 now. And you still think you can kill this fucker? Motioning for the other to circle around through the trees. But the creature, choosing his steps carefully, turned around while fending off the swordsman before him, and quickly moved to put a large tree at his back. Cursing, the first swordsman swung his sword back, and then, using a tactic favored in Gora, abruptly threw it like a spear. At just the moment when it seemed that the wide blade would pierce through the creature's bare arm, the man-thing spun aside and in one smooth motion knocked the sword from the air with the side of his hand, snatched it up from the ground, and charged. He knocked the sword from the air with the side of his hand. What is it? This guy is Superman. It soon became obvious that this fucker is invincible. He is the protagonist. He's not gonna die. And guess what? We got 100 volumes, so yeah, he's not dying. He's just not dying. It soon became obvious that the monster's seeming reluctance to pick up one of the fallen swords earlier was not due to any lack of skill with such weapons. He wielded a heavy blade easily, as if he had been raised with a sword in his hand. The Goron rider before him had just turned to flee when his head flew from his neck, trailing a red arc through the air. Spinning around, the creature caught the last soldier fleeing for the deeper woods and split him from the back of the head to his shoulders. "He did it!" shouted Linda. Remus tugged on her hand. He's coming this way." Surely enough, the creature had turned where he stood among the trees. Still holding the blood-stained broadsword, he raised his unsettling gaze toward the twins. Aside from him, they were the only ones still standing and whole. Rinda had forgotten her fear and stood entranced, returning his gaze. Remus tugged again on her hand, but seeing the creature come closer, yet he bravely stepped forward and picked up a sword off the ground and yelling brandished it. I think there should be a comma after that, right? a sword off the ground and yelling, brandished it. Yeah, there should be a comma after yelling. Oh well. Rinda, run! But her brother's voice hardly reached Rinda's ears. She is completely in another world. She's in another world. She's flying high. Drawn by the creature's incredible form, her eyes were fixed upon it. She could not tear them away. Her mind was under a siege of queries. What was this creature? Was he human or something more? What was this man-thing that had ripped apart a squad of fierce Goran riders? A full 11 men in the blink of an eye, and with his bare hands. Not the last two. The last two were actually slashed. Human or no, Rinda had no words to describe him. Surely from his neck down he was human, though his physique was extraordinary. His was a body that would plunge even a champion of the great ring into embarrassment at his own inadequacy. Not only was he huge, but he was also perfectly trained, with muscles that held untold strength, suppleness, and agility. They were the creature's only armor, covering chest, shoulders, and arms. His wide shoulders and mighty torso, tapering down to a rippling abdomen, were a sight to behold, but Rinda noticed deeper, older scars from untreated wounds beneath the light scratches, and the blood, most of it not the monster's own, from their fight just moments before, their marred and otherwise perfect form. Surely he had fought countless times before, and against even greater numbers. All this she could see because the creature wore nothing other than the hide, wrapping that only just... Nani? Wrapping that only just fit around his waist. Now, this is outdated speech, I think. Nothing other than the hide wrapping that only just fit around his waist. I don't know, man. This is a weird sentence. But anyways, it's just the hiding that wraps around his waist. That's it. Even his feet were bare. Yet, if she saw nothing else, she would have had to agree that this was a man. What is a man? It was what she saw from his neck up that forbade it. Rinda's eyes opened wide, and she absent-mindedly chewed at her knuckles, transfixed by the figure that had wandered out of some nightmare and that now stood before her. For atop his man's body was the head of a giant leopard. His mouth was turned up in a vicious snarl, revealing 2 enormous fangs, and his eyes were 2 fearsome blazes of burning yellow. And this leopard-headed man-beast, broadsword still hanging from his hand, was slowly walking toward the spot where Remus and Linda stood motionless. Just then, movement in the underbrush caught Linda's eye. One eye, not 2, 1. Makes sense, but still. Maybe not. Depends where the position is. Behind the leopard man, one of the riders that had been flattened underneath the captain's corpse had come too. Oh shit. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he was now quietly cocking his arm behind him to throw his sword at the creature's broad back. They're still trying to fight. These guys don't get it. They don't get it. They're just cannon fodder. They don't get it. Look out! Behind you! Shouted Linda. Why she would aid this creature that was very likely, no, almost certainly, coming toward them with the darkest designs of delivering them to the fate of the black riders that lay scattered on the ground, she could not have said. She could not have said. She could not have said. But before she knew it, she had shouted a warning, and the leopard man's reaction was swift. He's battle-hardened. He knows what he's doing. He spun around and knocked the blade from the air again with this insane move. This shit does not happen in real life. I wouldn't wager. With a lightning-like parry, then closed the distance between himself and the rider with two great strides and drove his sword through his attacker's neck. His movements were precise and merciless, as though the spilling of blood was something to which he had become accustomed long ago. Remus and I are surely next. Janus, protect us. Rinda covered her mouth with her hands. Remus shook, still gripping the sword, yet just holding the heavy blade seemed to have taxed the strength of his slender arms to their limit. Heavy blade, isn't it supposed to be like a very thin silver sword? That's what I was imagining until now. Then again, I was imagining more like a fleuret, but I guess it's not a fleuret, it's an actual sword. Silver, though. So take that as you will. Almost leisurely, the creature turned back around to face them. His two eyes shone with a goldish light, mocking the two children where they stood. Then, to the twins' startlement, that sounds like a joke word, although I'm sure it's probably real. To the twins' startlement, not surprise, just startlement. The broadsword dropped weakly from his hand. Oh, the guy is freaking like tired or something. It's probably gonna like faint now. Yeah, that always happens. That's like the biggest cliche ever. Fucker comes in, kills everybody, saves the people who need saving, the goodwill people, right? The good-hearted people, and then he faints. And then the goodwill people care for him, and then they all become friends. Cliche number 1 in the book of cliches. Weakly from his hand, it seemed as though all of a sudden, oh my god, it seemed as though for some plot-related reasons, strength had left the leopard man's entire body, all that force, all that vitality, and now he rocked side to side and finally fell to his knees on the forest floor. Oh my god. It's hilarious. What's wrong with him? What is this? Rima's voice quaked. Rinda noticed the bestial face and the hand reaching out toward him as though he was asking something of them. The mouth moved as though he was going to speak, but all that leaked out was an unnervingly flattened sort of growl. He's asking for something. He wants us to do something. Yeah, probably save him. Rinda, let's go now. The rider's horses. We can... Remus. Rinda's voice was half surprise, half outrage. He's just saved our lives. Can't you see? Oh, dude. Not a nice illustration. The guy's like, somebody help me. This is cool as fuck. Cool as fuck. Where's the sword? The sword fell? I'm looking at Rima's sword. Is that supposed to be Rima's sword? And did it fall? What's going on? I do not understand. You mean to tell me that thing's human? Well, it's clearly a man. It doesn't have breasts. Rinda. Look, said Rinda. The leopard man's huge hands had gone to his throat. What? With his left hand he grabbed his throat as though in pain, and he repeatedly scratched at his head with the right. Rinda clapped her hands and shouted, I understand, as she rushed forward. Her brother dropped the heavy sword and tried to stop his sister, but she wouldn't so much as look back. He's human. He's just had a leopard mask put on him. Take it off then. Look, he wants us to help him take it off. That's an interesting assessment. Rinda, I don't think we should bother him, said Remus, but his sister cut him off again. Well now, have you lost your nerve as well as your sense of obligation? Clearly, Rinda had made up her mind about what was going on. She strode forward without a bit of hesitation. How can I help? What do you want me to do? She reached out a delicate hand to the leopard man's blood-covered head, trying to see underneath the mask. The young girl with a slender boyish figure, whirring over the great hulk of the leopard man, looked like a rabbit or a frail little bird poised before a lion. Or before a leopard. Why would you compare the leopard man with a lion and instead of comparing him with the leopard? Ah! I'm going crazy here. Then the leopard man spoke, finally. Speak something, dude. Don't be like Kamen Rider Amazon, who doesn't speak, or at least barely speaks. Or rather, oh damn it, the low whine he had been making slowly took the shape of words. Going is the name of this book. What? Again and again he spoke that word. What is that? Is that something you want? How can I help you? Rinda repeated patiently, but just then the great leopard man's body lurched, and at last he fell on his side on the thick undergrowth of the forest. Rinda sprang aside as the great body slammed to the ground. But then, emboldened, came back and laid her hand on the man's shoulder, which was still sticky with blood. Then she gave a start of surprise. Dear me, Remus, this man is sick. He seems very weakened. Why, to see him a few moments ago, who would have known? Remus! Remus! Go to the spring and find something to bring some water in quickly. If we don't do something now, I fear this man will die. Rinda, are you quite sane in the head? Ramus began. If you stand there like a fool much longer, it'll be nightfall. With all the air of one who is accustomed to being obeyed, Rinda pointed her unwilling brother into the woods toward the spring. Reluctantly, the boy stood up. Stood up? So he fell down after standing... What? The boy stood up. So somehow, between page 30 and page 31, Remus just fell to his knees somehow. And nobody mentioned that. And we're only finding about that now. Finding about that out now. His sister was completely taken with the man creature. That was clear. She shook the last few brambles out of her glittering hair, and with a determined expression on her face, she sat down once again by the side of this man with the head of a leopard. And that brings us to chapter 2, I think. I don't even know anymore. But it's interesting. Very interesting. To greet the coming of night in the marches requires a great deal of bravery. This is true even should you have a roof over your head and 4 strong walls around you. As for camping outside, no man endowed with wits would ever consider it even in the direst of circumstances. Growing up in the safety of the middle country. Ah, the middle country. It's called medieval for a reason. It's because it's the mid. The hardships of the marches were foreign to the twins of Paris. The hardships. I thought the hardships, what? Those bulgy hardships. No, the hardships. What a weird place to divide the word. What a weird place. And the fiends, beasts, and barbarians that lived there, mere fairy tales. Fear had always been at a distance, never something that jumped out and bit into their hearts. Had it been otherwise, there surely was no way they would have spent an entire night in the woodwood with the prickly Vasya as their only shelter. Even though Rinda and Remus were blissfully unaware of the good fortune that had protected them thus far, this was to be their second night in the forest, and if nothing else, the events of the day had taught them caution. The bodies of men, riders from Staffless Keep, lay about them, on the ground where they had fallen, and it was a certainty that more riders would be out searching for their missing brothers. Rinda, Remus spoke in a low, worried voice, their grim surroundings having a chilling effect on him. This guy is chilled by anything. He quavers at the smallest ant crawling at his feet. I swear. I'm telling you. Not now! Go pick more of that grass! Rinda spoke without even turning to look at him. So accustomed was she to her role as undisputed leader. Supreme leader Rinda. She was busily tending to the wounded warrior that had saved them, washing his powerful arms and legs with a wetted cloth and applying a poultice of medicinal herbs. What about the leopard fucker? Is he, still in a coma? But the sun's going down, her brother continued. I can see, you know. It'll be nightfall soon. I know that's precisely why I'm hurrying. Let's build a fire then. I'll go get grass, okay? No, Rinda's voice was stern. If they see the smoke from the keep, we're as good as caught. But if we wait until dark, Remus, I know why you're afraid. Because you're a sissy. What? I know why you're afraid. As she spoke, Rinda had propped up the man's leopard head and was now attempting to pour water through his lips without much success. It's because we're in the marches, right? But what would you have us do? Shall we just sally over to Staffless Keep and say, please, sirs, we're afraid of the ghouls and demons in the woods, might we stay just one night? You think that would work? But Rinda. My name is not to be spoke. My name is to be spoken, not whined. Don't speak my name in vain, you fucker, Rinda said, her eyes flashing. Really? Is that any way for the true heir to the throne of Paris to act? But strength, Remus. We have to live through this somehow. Now, we've managed to get horses and swords. Oh wow, the horses didn't flee? Now that is the real curiosity here. Usually horses flee in a battle, but not always. And if they're trained, they're not gonna flee. But if they're too close, they're gonna flee even if they're trained. Especially when all the riders died. So it's like, I don't know. Seems a bit implausible. Too implausible. Seems a bit, just a little bit implausible. Now we've managed to get horses and swords, and there's food in the riders' saddlebags. If we can just make it through the night, tomorrow we can ride out onto the world, maybe even find a town of some kind. But for tonight we have no choice. We're staying here. We should have just left that thing you're taking care of alone and gotten away while it was still light. You know, he's got a point. And lose our way in the accursed Rootwood and end up riding around in circles for all time? Don't be foolish. And besides, I always know the right path. After all, what? You're contradicting yourself. Rinda furrowed her brow and spoke as though deep in thought. After all, I am a seer of Paros. Her brother fell silent. I wonder if this seer of Paros is like the oracle in ancient Greece. Or maybe it's something completely different. Maybe it has something to do with like religion, because seer, holy... No, then again. The brother fell silent. On the surface, the twins of Paros may have looked like two pearls from the same oyster, but Remus had known for all of his 14 years. That, inside, they were different. You don't frigging say, my man. You don't frigging say. For he lacked the power that should have been his by birthright, along with the royal blood that flowed through his veins. He lacked the gift of foresight and clairvoyance, the gift of prophecy. That's the complete opposite. That just proves your own point. Your own point is just unproven by yourself. It's like, yes, Remus was supposed to get the gift of foresight and clairvoyance, but he didn't get it exactly because he has a twin. Then instead of him getting everything, she gets a part of it as well. Or maybe she gets all of it. So that just proves your point. That just proves all of our points. Rinda barely noticed her brother's injured silence. Instead, her face suddenly lit up and she leaned over her giant patient. Remus, look! He's come awake! He's come awake! The leopard head shook from side to side, weakly at first, and then with greater determination. The twilight was a pale lavender in the gloaming now. Set in the leopard head, the man's eyes shone with an unearthly yellow glow in the deepening dusk. So she never actually managed to take off his mask. Why didn't she try? And why didn't the author tell us if she tried or not? And what was her assessment of the mask? Come on, man. You're dropping the ball here. The man's eyes shone with an unearthly yellow glow in the deepening dusk. Then he turned to look at the two children leaning over him. The giant maw moved slightly, and out came a low growl. Remus, startled, drew back, but Rinda stayed leaning close over him, holding his head in her delicate hands and trying to get across to him somehow that they were his friends. Water? You want water? Then she lifted the Goran helmet that her brother had used as a makeshift bucket. Nice. Good thinking. Smart move. To bring water from the spring, the leopard man abruptly rose to a sitting position and reached out a hand, his eyes flashing. But when he lifted the helm to his mouth, he growled wildly in despair and frustration. The leopard mask placed on his head formed a barrier between face and water, preventing him from quenching his thirst. What are you talking about? Don't you have a mouth? Just pour it on the mouth. I still don't get it. Rinda tilted her head quizzically at his despair. Then suddenly she clapped her hands together as an idea came to her. Standing up, she began to search around the clearing. I'm looking for a straw made of plastic. Wait a minute. Are we in the, Middle Ages? Where am I gonna find plastic in the Middle Ages? Oh, damn it, we're doomed. We're doomed. We don't have plastic. You might as well kill yourself now. She began to search around the clearing. After a while, she returned to her patient with a satisfied look on her face, brandishing her find, a single hollow stalk of straw. Now, wait a minute. Hey, wait a fucker right there. Are you telling me that straws grow up in nature? Are you telling me there are, straw trees? And they're hollow? And you can drink from them? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Straws grow in nature? What are you talking about? I can't accept this. I can't accept this. No, I refuse. After demonstrating with the straw herself, she gave it to the man, who placed it between his lips and began eagerly to drink. It was likely that a good 9/10 of his weakened state was due to severe thirst and hunger. He seemed greatly improved after he had finished drinking, in what seemed to Rinda an impossibly brief period of time, the contents of the large helm. Who would do such a thing? Rinda spoke as she gazed thoughtfully at the leopard. Why, if you put a mask like that on someone and left him alone, how would he eat or even drink? Seriously, this guy's like an invalid? He can't do anything by himself? No way, is this the kind of story this is? Come on, man. What the hell? This disappoints me greatly. I tried to take it off while you were sleeping, you see, but it wouldn't budge. It's being fixed with some foul curse, I should imagine. But really, how could a powerful swordsman like you end up having something like that put on your head? Because he wasn't a powerful swordsman before he got that frigging mask. Is this really going to be the story of like a guy stuck in a leopard mask and he can't drink or sleep and he needs everybody's help? Seriously? Because that's not the kind of story I want to read. Like, seriously. I'm serious here. The ears of the leopard head were bent forward attentively. Seriously? The ears of the leopard head? So he can move those ears. This is weird. This is weird. Is he really... Maybe he's really half leopard. Because if he can move the ears of the head, it's not his real ears, because a leopard has ears in different places than a human. From deep within the mask, two eyes sparkled with a penetrating light as they stared at Rinda. Evidence he understood everything she said. The two gaps in the mask around his eyes were the only places where his true face showed through, but still, thought Rinda, so fierce was the suppressed rage and iron will hidden in those yellow eyes that she would not have been surprised to find that in fact they were the eyes of some wild creature and not a man's at all. So you're telling me his natural eye color is yellow? When Rinda had finished speaking, the leopard man raised his powerful hands and tried once again to pull off the mask. You've been trying for years, man. You can't do it. His efforts were made in vain. It's friggin' glue with like super glue or something, with cement. His efforts were made in vain. He let his hands drop again and gave a low, anguished growl, but he reached out again when Rinda offered him some of the dried meat rations she had taken from the Black Rider's saddlebags. It seemed the strips were easier to push through the mask than the water had been, which he soon began chewing on the dried meat hungrily. I still don't get this mask fully. I mean, maybe it would be nice to have like a picture. I still don't get it. Like, it's a leopard mask. Doesn't it have a mouth? Because if it has a mouth, then you can easily put things inside the mouth. And under the leopard's mouth is your mouth. So, shouldn't it be easy? Unless you're because the leopard has like a protruding chin, a protruding like nose, right? It has a protruding nose, so maybe it's like I'm trying really hard to imagine this thing. So maybe it's like a dog's, or obviously like a cat's mouth, like a cat's face, jaw, like a protruding jaw. So maybe your mouth is so far back into the mask that you can't really bite into something because your mouth is here, but the mask, it doesn't allow access. It could be that. But even still, I don't know, even still, you can still like with the helmet, for example, you could still have poured the water directly on your mouth, on the mask's mouth, and that would literally be your mouth. deeper. So he could have poured the water instead of trying to, I don't know, trying to sip it. He's trying to sip it like some fine tea. You could have just poured that shit on your head and it would have gotten inside your mouth. I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it. This guy's just pretending. He's pretending he's an invalid. He's just, damn it. Damn it. This is all wrong. This is all wrong. Where was I? It seemed, yeah, the strips. Yeah. Well, did I read that out loud? Well, hopefully I did. It seemed the strips were easy to push through the mess in the water had been, and soon began to drive me hungry. Well, at least you won't die of starvation, even if you can't get that off, proclaimed Rinda, seeming somewhat relaxed as she knelt to watch the ravenous man eat. Rima stood nearby, staring in round-eyed wonder. So what? He's actually human? This guy's pissing me off so much. He asked with some doubt. More than you are sometimes, I should think, said Rinda. No. This leopard mask was put on him by some king or nobleman, or perhaps he was an evil sorcerer whose wrath he incurred. I'm sure of it. He certainly didn't put it on himself. I can't imagine anyone who would. Yes, it must be the work of some sorcerer. Why else would it stick on it like it does even when he struggles to remove it? We've saved you, she said, now turning to the leopard-headed warrior. So we're your friends. Now what can we call you? While Rinda had been talking, a change had come over the leopard man. It seemed the food and water had succeeded in bringing him back to life, though doubtlessly his phenomenal strength and powers of recuperation had also helped. Still, holding a strip of dried meat in his hand, he let out a muffled growl. Rinda jerked back. We're your friends, okay? Get out. Rinda jerked back, startled at first, until she realized that he was saying something, though the mask made his words hard to make out. Now, I doubt that. You can put all the masks you want on your frigging mouth. If you say a word, if you say syllables, it's not going to come out as a growl. The mask is not going to convert syllables into growls. It's just not going to happen. This is, no. What's that? She prompted him again. Guin. Guin, asked Rinda. Seemed to be saying that one word over and over. Is that your name? I think so. Now his words were coming through more clearly. You can talk. You're not retarded after all. I'm Rinda, and this is my twin brother Remus. What land are you from? By the shade of your skin, I'd say you're not from the north. Or are you? Aura, was the only answer he gave. Pardon? Asked Rinda. What was that? Aura. Aura. Is that where you're from? I don't know. His words were horribly muffled and slow as he struggled to speak through the leopard head mask. You got that word, those words, they reappear so many times that you gotta, speak them faster and faster every time. Because if you say leopard head mask, it's gonna take a long time. So it's like leopard head mask, leopard head mask, leopard head mask, leopard head mask. Rinda was starting to get irritated. Yeah, I'm too. I'm like at the edge here. And clucked her tongue impatiently as she leaned toward him. Aura. Guin. So tell me, how did you ever get this thing put on your head? Rinda? Remus might not have been as quick-witted and lively as his sister, nor was he a prophet, but he never lacked in practical sense and logic. While casting worried glances around the deepening navy-shaded dusk, he had seen that getting the leopard man to speak enthralled his sister all the more every minute. She seemed to have forgotten their grim surroundings, where they were, and how much trouble they were in. Unable to restrain himself any longer, he reached out and grabbed Rinda's shoulder. What? That hurts. I'm Rinda. The night. It's coming. I know that, Rinda snapped back, but her face had taken on a somewhat worried look. She took another look around to reassess their immediate situation, and finding the shadows of the approaching night far deeper than she had thought, she quickly made the sign of Janus. The sign? The sign of Janus, like the cross sign, like the cross sign from your head to your chest. Excuse me, she said, turning back to the leopard-headed man. The night's coming. The night is coming! So it seems. Whether the twins had become used to the speech of this man who called himself Guin, or whether the water he had been drinking had finally soothed his parched throat, his words were much clearer now. He looked around them deep into the viscous valley gloom that filled the woods and hid lurid promises of fear and horrors unknown. The underbrush in the woods around them rippled and rustled as a billow of wind picked up, carrying with it a foul, rotten odor. Vampire vines. And again, these vampire vines. Do they actually suck your blood if you get too close to them? I need to understand. Vampire vines swished in the treetops, and the beady eyes of vipers and things far worse glimmered crimson in the thick brush below. Silent during the day, the forest was coming alive again, showing its true face in the dark of night. Is that a problem? Is that a problem? You don't say. You are retarded after all. Rinda clucked her tongue in despair and disbelief. Really? Have you no idea what this is? This isn't the middle country anymore. Why? Staphylos Keep stands right on the border between the middle country and the marches. Goran rule is just a rumor in the wind out here. And even the Black Riders of Mongol wouldn't think of going farther than the Woodwood with anything less than full company. And that's exactly why we've come to the forest to hide. Better demons that don't know where we are than... What? Better demons that don't know where we are than riders that do. Better demons that don't know where we are than riders that do, right? But not now, with night almost here, she continued. That might not be a bad thing where you're from, but here in the marches the night belongs to spirits and wildlings, and worse. Night is when the forest dwellers come out. That is why I want to make a fire, said Remus, hugging himself tightly, his teeth quietly chattering. Now he's comforting himself. No, said Rinda, reflexively turning him down. Stop! Just cut it out, will you? Then after some thought she gave in, but I guess there's no way around it. The Vazia bushes were enough to keep us safe for one night, but you're too big to hide there. Or wait, Guin, do you have some spirit blood on you? Are you not afraid of the night? Bitch, I am the night. I am the night. Can't you see this mask and these ears, these pointy ears? And these fangs? I am the night. Yes, you can call me Batman, Leopard Man. For some reason, Rinda had been reluctant to call him by his name. And when the word left her mouth, a peculiar, almost otherworldly shudder ran through her limbs. What's wrong with me? I don't know, man, but I surmise it's called puberty. Though well versed in omens and signs of all kinds, suddenly Rinda was scared to examine with her inner eye the tremors that now shook her body. She can do that? Wow. Aware of her brother's suspicious gaze, she followed his lead. And wrapped her arms around herself. Oh, I'm gonna do that too. I'm gonna do that too. And grabbed her shoulders, pretending that her shivering was due to the cold of the forest air. The leopard man, for his part, hadn't seemed to notice Rinda's discomfort at all. Instead, he had stretched his giant hands before his face and seemed to be engrossed in staring at them. Are these hands mine? I was wounded, he muttered so low that only Rinda could clearly hear him. Here, too, a scar from a blade. I must have been in battle. But this looks not unlike the mark of a lash. The marches? Staphylos Keep, this Woodwood I have heard of. But why would I have come here? An enigma, along with this. Here he lifted his hand to finger the leopard mask where his head and face should have been. How have I come to have this? You mean you don't know? Shouted Rinda. Shouted her. Wow. Why? He's like whispering to her, and she's like, you mean you don't know? Putting her hands to her mouth in surprise. You don't remember at all? It seems that way. Thanks perhaps to the empathic abilities that ran in her blood, Rinda and Remus, particularly Rinda. That Remus guy, he's kind of a ditz, had no trouble understanding Guin's speech after a while. Had it not been them, had he spoken to unattentive ears, the slow muffled speech emitted by the great leopard mouth would have sounded nothing so much like animal whines and growling. Whom did I fight? Whom did you fight? Why, you demolished an entire squad of Goran Duke's Black Riders. The Duke is not capitalized. It's not capitalized, the Duke. I wonder what this means. I'm like that. I look into things way too much. Like, if I wrote this, I would write Duke with capitalization. But because it's the Goran Duke, you know, the Goran Duke. But here it's not capitalized, so who knows? Rinda pointed at his handiwork as she spoke. The dead people slashed in the slashed and rotting. That's gonna attract animals. Don't you think? You say you're so like Rinda. You say you're so intelligent and clever, and you can see and do whatever the fuck you want. Yet you didn't frigging realize that dead people attract animals. You should have got rid of them or moved away from them. Oh, Nelly, that's like lesson number 1. Survival lesson number 1. Dead things attract living things. It's literally that. The leopard man looked around and shook his head in bewilderment. I did that? And what's more, you saved us. Rinda, can we make a fire? Please. I can't take it any longer, said Remus, almost shouting in his desperation, forcing Rinda back to the reality of their present situation. Right, of course. But you do know we're not going to make it through the night alive. What? But you do know we're going to die, right? Yeah, sure. Okay, then. You do know that we're going to die. It's basically what she said. Goes the smell of blood, I hear, added Remus. Goes the smell of blood, I hear. Goes like the smell of blood, I hear, added Remus. It was a little bit of trivia he had learned a long time ago. It's just a bit of trivia. It's not like survival thing. It's not like important information for survival. It's just some trivia. Yeah. And it can't be safe to be near those bodies. You don't say. Only now you realize it. You guys are friggin' dumber than you make out. You're even dumber than the leopard man. The spring, said Rinda after some thought. We'll just build a fire near the spring and spend the night between the water and the fire. The Nixies won't come out of the water to bother us. They won't? How do you know that? And isn't fire the shield that Janus gave mankind? I don't think so. Right, and we'll have to take 3 horses with us too. We'll need them to ride out of this accursed forest at first light of day. Began Guin, struggling to find the right words. Why are you here, in a place of such danger? Well, Remus began to reply when his sister gave him a sharp pinch on the arm. Finally, their backstories are going to be explained now. The Archduke of the Mongolia is after us. Archduke, once again without capitalization, so it wasn't a mistake. Although I would say it is, because these names like Duke, King, Archduke, they should all be capitalized. I don't get it. This is not right. This is not the correct use of the English language, you fuckers. Not the correct use. Was all Rinda said. Well, we better get going. So, maybe I should take a look at the map again. Maybe I'm going to take a look at the map again later. Then again, like, the map is not that big, so you don't really, you don't really get the whole picture of the world. You only get a small, like segment of the coastal region. Who am I? What the hell? The giant man's voice was so soft. You're Guin. You said it yourself. Do you have Alzheimer's? The giant man's voice was so soft it barely passed his lips, yet it was so full of raw anguish that Rinda, who had just now been in a great hurry, stopped and turned around. This guy's completely lost. Who am I? Guin. Is that my name? With whom did I fight? And why am I in these woods? And this? For what possible reason could this have been put on me? What sorcery holds it, that it will not come off no matter what I do?
As I sit here, I cannot even recall my face. Was I being pursued, the leopard man asked no one in particular, or had I escaped from some punishment for a crime? Where was I born? Who taught me the way of the sword? I don't even know what kind of life I have lived. I remember nothing. And Aura, like Guin, the word that seems to be my name, this word, Aura, has been ringing in my head since I awoke. Aura. Is it some thing, some person? What could it mean? My harbor, my house, my armor, my lord. Where are these things? Is there a place where I might find peaceful sleep in the arms of a friend? Or a place where if I went, I would be hunted down, a wanted man, my life at risk? I do not know. With this, the warrior grabbed the leopard head in his giant fists and strained as though he had gone mad. He is mad to take it off. But the mask stayed stubbornly affixed to his head. Crouching down, he covered his head with his arms. Seeing him troubled so, Rinda's kind heart was filled with sympathy. She placed a hand on the warrior's shoulder and tried to comfort him, though he were a child. "You must be quite tired, and you've been wounded in battle," she said, speaking gently in her sweetest voice. "I'm sure you'll remember everything in due time, and find out how to get rid of that mask too. I'll do whatever I can to help. But for now we must go. We are not welcome here. All will be better in the morning." 3. It was a strange, bewitching night, not one the twins would soon forget. Long afterwards the memory of it would come to them, to Rinda, as she swam in the waters near Corsia, or sat in a Mongolian tower, to Remus as he lay between sheets of Paris silk. Perhaps even the warrior Guin recalled it somewhere in the depths of his heart. It was a night as mysterious as the holy night of birth. The holy night of birth? What does that mean? There they were not even the hardened mercenaries of the marches. Patrol would think of staying after sundown, deep in the borderland woods, with only their blazing campfire between them and the ghosts, ghouls, and demons that roamed the night. Not that the three sitting around the fire seemed entirely out of place. The twins could easily have passed for Naiades or Dryads, had they been wearing light white robes instead of their battered travel garb. So like spirits they were, with their frost-colored hair sparkling in the firelight, violet eyes that looked almost silver in the darkness, and long slender arms and legs. Their companion seemed to have come from another world entirely, a warrior of heroic proportions, with a dark rage burning in the eyes that peered out from his ferocious-looking leopard mask. At Rinda's suggestion, Guin had taken a black breastplate, iron gauntlets, and greaves from the corpse of the largest of the Goran riders he had slain. He added to this a pair of high leather boots, strapped on the finest broadsword he could find, and hung a light but sturdy black cloak from his shoulders. Wow, he's the he's the picture of guts. He's the picture of guts. He did not take a helmet. Oh well, why do you think so, you freaking prick? You freaking joker. Why did he not take a friggin' helmet? Why do you think? Wearing one of the black helms of Gora would have fatal consequences should they happen to encounter any of the barbarians or soldiers from one of the many lands they were at war with Gora. Moreover, there was another simpler reason. It was unlikely that any of the helms there would have fit over his giant features. Rinda admitted to herself that she was in love with the friggin' leopard man. What? Recovered. Rinda admitted to herself that recovered from his exhaustion with a full set of clothes, Guin could cut quite a handsome figure. Even his strange leopard head seemed much less a horrifyingly wild thing. You're used to it. He was like a god, she thought. Half man, half beast, a noble warrior infused with untold strength and an animal soul. The three companions constantly supplied their bonfire with oily grasses and branches to maintain its strength. These steadily burning flames cast their orange light
an alluring pool of wavering radiance that made for quite a fantastic sight. The circle of firelight carved out a small but certain territory. Inside was the traveler's refuge. Outside were the spirits and fiends to whom the Black Knight of the Marches belonged. The twins of Paris spread cloaks on the grass and sat themselves down. With their hands on their knees, they huddled close together. Occasionally they would shoot glances at the hostile darkness beyond the firelight's reach. Then they would turn their gaze toward their mysterious companion, who sat hunched over, like the firelight glinting in his giant frame. Reflected sparks from the fire danced like little devils across the metal fittings of his armor, emphasizing his strange features. He was the stuff of warriors' nightmares. In the darkness beyond, the shadows of things even darker writhed in vexation at the bold challenge of the campfire, outraged at his incursion into their territory. Even in the Marches, there was a clear borderline between the human and spirit worlds, and as long as people sat awake around the fire and it was clear the rule of man was being upheld there, the spirits could not touch them. It's your ground, I ain't going there. The Rootwood, a silent wilderness during the day, now teemed with unholy life, a swarm of ghostly things that did not walk the earth as men do. Yet the flimsy boundary the three intruders had made with their circle of firelight kept them from harm. Seems like plot armor to me. But outside the hopelessly short range of the firelight, the forest dwellers waited for a chance to do mischief. Rinda thought that Rinda could hear the slithering sound of some giant things sliding moistly through the underbrush, breathing in a ragged "siu-sik, siu-sik." She could see the glinting eyes of shadowy things. Several of them had gathered in the shallow darkness just beyond the reach of the light, making eerie noises that seemed to swish right past her ears. Once she heard the whoosh of giant wings as something took off, followed by the clamor of a desperate struggle in the fall. Oh man, this is completely wrong. Once. This is why there needs to be a comma after once, god damn it. It's like once she heard the whoosh, no, it's once, comma. She heard the whoosh of giant wings as something took off, followed by the clamor of a desperate struggle. In the following quiet, the horrifying snap-snap sound of bones crunching and the slurp of something drinking. Then a flurry of commotion as the unseen predators quarreled over the prey. People are dying, like people. Animals and monsters are dying and eating over there, and we're just huddled here in our little magic circle. Each time they heard a new noise, Rinda and Remus would huddle even closer and hold each other's hands more tightly. For 15 years they had lived as an inseparable pair. They're 15 years old already? Damn. And she's still not of age? What the hell is this? What is going on here? She's 15 and she's not of age yet. She's not like, she hasn't had her menarche yet. Or did she? God damn it, Arthur, explain your shit more clearly. They had lived as an inseparable pair, so inseparable that if they were ever separated, each would feel incomplete, like the lost half of a broken whole. But when they were together, no matter what happened, they could always find the strength to make it through. Yeah, amidst insults and insanity and critiques and scathing critiques. Still, this was too cruel a place for the twins, mere children, neither of them having performed the rites to spend the night. Rinda could hardly bear to sit silently any longer, listening to the freakish, fearful noises in the night. It's really dark here, isn't it? I mean, the fire's not going out, right? No sooner had the words left her mouth than she turned to Remus with a startled look on her face. The fire's not going out, right? Going out, right? 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 The mocking sound of tree spirits echoing back her words filled the deep woods around them. The warrior Guin stiffened and sat upright. He didn't like the undisguised malice he could hear in their voices, so he put his hand in the grip of his broadsword. Yeah, let's kill ghosts. Let's slash ghosts with a sword. I'm sure it's gonna work. I'm sure. Don't worry, they're just mocker imps. They can't do anything to us, said Rinda, glaring out into the darkness. Then turning back to the fire as if to ignore them, she changed the subject.
No sleeping, Remus. If you're not off for even a second, you have nightmares, you know. Just pinch your knee if you start getting sleepy. So the guy never sleeps. He just doesn't sleep. How does he live? How does he live without sleeping? What is going on? What is a man? What is a man? I'm fine. You're far from it. This will be the second night we haven't slept, and it's gonna be tough. But I know if we can just make it through until tomorrow. Isn't the rule like 3 days without sleeping will kill you or something? Well, you don't know that, do you, Rinda Farcia? Nobody knows whether we're going to see tomorrow or not. Her brother replied, sulky. Rinda fell silent and briefly considered not saying anything back. But until she remembered the dark sounds that crawled in the silence, and decided she much preferred her brother's complaints and the mockeries. Tomorrow will come, she said, proudly lifting her silver head. I know it. Tomorrow will come, and everything will be better. I mean, no matter how bad it is, it has to be better than yesterday, when we had to spend the night in the Vazia bushes where it hurt just to breathe. Or the day before, galloping along, hanging onto those saddles for dear life, and crying. Or the day before that. Rinda bit her tongue and fell silent, as a horrible scene from her memory floated before her eyes. She quickly put her hands to her mouth. Rinda, it's okay. I'm okay, she said. We'll make it through this. But the look she gave her brother was filled with worry. You two, can't you shut up? I'm trying to sleep here, said the leopard-headed warrior. It seemed he was at last taking genuine interest in what was going on around him. It's not interesting at all, though. Why are you two wandering in this wood? What brought you to this place? Well, we were... Quiet, Remus! Rinda cut off her brother before turning to Guin. Don't you know who your friends are? You saved us and we saved you, but still you don't know. I am no man's friend. That's what I'm talking about. Rinda shivered slightly. The fire was still burning brightly. She shivered not because of the forest cold, but rather because she had felt something, the shadow of some giant creature that stirred the darkness with its passing. It's so very dark here, Rinda moaned. You got a fire right in front of you and it's so very dark. And can't you hear that sound over there? That's something gnawing on bones. It's creepy. Rinda's a prophet, a seer, Remus explained to the warrior, sounding a little proud. She's closer to the spirit world than me or other ordinary people. When we were born, the prophets of Paris foresaw that she would be 2 pearls. No. When we were born, the prophets of Paris foresaw that we would be 2 pearls. One an elixir, the other a treasure. These prophets of Paris seem like very insane individuals to me. Guin was silent. They told me it meant Rinda would be a great prophet and a sorceress, and I the sovereign of Paris. Remus! His sister said sharply, but Guin seemed to take an interest in what Remus was saying. Paris! Sovereign! Tell me more! Metal Gear! Yes, Paris. Even if you lost most... Yes, Paris. Even if you lost most of your memory, surely you still remember the Kingdom of Paris, pearl of the Middle Country, the Kingdom of Paris. Yes, the Kingdom of Paris, ruled by His Holiness Archduke III. But... Rinda paused. It is no more, she said flatly, realizing it was foolish to speak evasively any longer. Both twins' eyes welled with tears they had long held back. In their memory the image of the beautiful crystal spires of home blurred and ran. And once again they could see the horrible things they had been trying so hard to forget. Towers burning and crumbling in the fires of war, people being cut down in the streets, everything folly. They torched the crystal tower, murdered the holy royal family, the king and the queen, uncapitalized beings who were granted their thrones by Janus himself, and all the crusaders of Paris, killed. Rinda spoke softly, cursing the Gorons. I will not forget the blood that flowed under the blue moon in the dragon year, not until the day I die. Did I fight in that battle? Was I there? Asked Guin, more concerned about his forgotten identity than her loss. I don't give a shit about you. I'm talking about me here. I would know, said Rinda brusquely. but there's certainly no custom of putting leopard heads on prisoners in Paris, and I would think that someone trying to hide his face by putting on something like that would just end up attracting more attention. Now, the Mongolia army of General Vlad, one of the Archdukes of Gora, is known to do all sorts of despicable things, but I've never heard of even them torturing or restraining a person in such an odd fashion.
You would know, you're just a kid. You're just a kid. You don't know anything about the world, goddammit. Why do I even bother?
Rinda clicked her tongue, almost seeming upset that the act of entrapping someone in a leopard mask couldn't be added to the list of Archduke of Mongolia's crimes.
Imagine that being an actual, like, torture device. You now are gonna be tortured. What? You're gonna, like, you hit me with a hot iron? Are you going to, like, stick a hot iron in me? Are you going to, like, hit me with a lash? No. I am going to put this mask on your face. Okay then. Okay then. Alright. I think that's better than everything else. You know, I think this guy came from the Southland, said Remus. Rinda fought for a moment. Well, that might be the case, and then again it might not. God damn this book, she declared as if to put the Easter to rest for the moment. She was scanning the darkness around them, her nervousness growing. When the bards would sing of spending a night in the marshes, gathered around the campfire, it used to sound so nice, so romantic. I don't think I shall ever want to hear one of those phonies playing the kithera and chortling such nonsense again. I believe, said Guin, his voice rising abruptly as he looked into the sky, that we are on the verge of a much greater adventure than merely warming ourselves around the campfire. Oh, dude, this guy is straddling. He's straddling the fourth wall. He's straddling it like a maniac. He's like, I believe that there's an adventure coming for us. 100 volumes! Normally, I would have already dropped this book at this point, but I don't know. It's hilarious. It's ridiculous. Like a satire. This book feels like a satire of everything medieval. Around them in the darkness. Like the guy has a freaking leopard mask and he can't drink or eat. If that's not satire, I don't know what it is. Around them in the darkness, things swished and scattered, startled by his sudden growling cry. I want an adventure. I can't take this anymore. I need something to happen to me. What is it? The wind is wet and I smell rain. If a storm comes, our fire is fucked. How scheisse. Rinda was at a loss. How could this warrior feel something that not even she, Vasia, could? The night air seemed no wetter than usual to her, unless he really did have the senses of a leopard. Well, of course he does. This guy is the leopard. He is not a guy with a leopard mask. He is a leopard with the body of a man. It all makes sense. But Rinda didn't wonder long. She knew that if a real storm was coming, they were in a great deal of trouble, and soon she too could smell the wetness blowing in the wind. She bit her lip and shivered as a premonition racked her body. The fire danced and trembled in the rising wind. Beyond it, Rinda could sense the things that lived in the darkness moving back and forth, flapping and fluttering as they went. Jan the Weaver of Fate is a spiteful old fool, the girl exclaimed, punching her little fist up at the sky as she cursed. Jan the Weaver of Fate is a spiteful old fool. He could have just let us sleep, but no, he won't even allow us to make it through one measly night huddled around this fire. He must want very much to end our royal bloodline. That's what I think. So she's cursing Yarn, the Weaver of Fate. I'm guessing that's like cursing luck. It's like, oh, Lady Luck, you bitch, you fucked me. It's like that. It's like Yarn, the Weaver of Fate, that controls destinies and shit. That's pretty much what this is. Rinda, he's got 100 years. He'll hear you. I want him to hear me. Fuck that man. Whispered Remus, hurriedly uttering a prayer of penance. Please don't kill me. Please don't freaking. Please, please, please. I wouldn't care if each of those 100 years were as long as a Taurus has. I really wouldn't, said Rinda.
a note of challenge in her voice. "Come at me, bro! Come at me!" But she bit her lip and fell silent when she saw the clouds hastening ominously across the sky and the trees lurching back and forth as though in spasms of agony, and the countless crimson eyes all turning to look in her direction, watching and waiting. Well, you're gonna get what you wanted. The twins held tight to each other's hands, wondering how they were going to get through this latest in a long series of calamities. The warrior Guin sat still with his shoulders hunched, glaring at the fire. He seemed either utterly unaware of or utterly indifferent to the approaching danger, so it surprised Remus and Rinda when he suddenly stood up and slapped the hilt of his broadsword. "Somebody gotta kill these fuckers." "Careful, you make the fire go," began Rinda, but the look in Guin's eyes made her break off. The warrior's eyes were gleaming in the firelight. But it was a gleaming filled with darkness. So much like the eyes watching the three from beyond their circle of firelight that for a second Rinda thought he was one of those things come into the light to kill them. "Run with me, girl child. Follow close if you want to live to see daybreak." Guin's voice was a howl. Quickly he swept down and picked up the longest stick from the pile, and after lighting it in fire, thrust it upwards like a torch, and ran off into the woods. "Wait!" In a flash, the twins shot to their feet and chased after the leopard-headed warrior, still holding hands. Guin was fast, but they managed to keep up with him. An unseen force seemed to be guiding the leopard warrior, or perhaps it was the wild sense of a forest beast. They keep comparing him to a beast every single time. It's like the author loves to do that. Like, oh, he's doing it because he's a man, or maybe it's because he's a beast. He can sense that because he's a man, or maybe it's because he's a beast. Keep doing it again and again. Deftly. He dodged this way. He dodged this way. What is this way? And that way, through trees. Dodge this way, now that way. What great descriptions we have here. He dodged this way, and then he dodged that way, and then that happened, and then the thing happened. And so he said that thing, and then the thing happened, and then everybody did the thing, and then the thing ended the book. And that's the end of the thing, of the book, of the thing. Through trees that stood on all sides like eerie black skeletons, picking up a trail that had been lost for hundreds of years. Guin, please, where are we going?" Remus called out, gasping for breath. "Quiet, save your strength," Guin shouted back, then added quickly, "Stavlos, keep!" "Rinda, did you—" Remus began. But Rinda interrupted with a scream as a grass snake cut across their path. She quickly regained her composure, however, sensing that if she did not, she would surely perish. "He's right," she gasped as they ran. "Either we take over the keep or wander through these woods until we die. I bet we can do it too." "What? You're gonna take over a keep? Aren't there like soldiers there? You're just 3 people. Aren't there like 20 soldiers in a keep?" "I don't think that's a good idea." "I said no talking. If you would live, run to Stavlos' keep," shouted Guin. "Guin," Rinda yelled. "Guin, listen. The horses, Guin." "What?" "That clearing where you fought the Goron Riders. If their mounts are still there." "Right. Why didn't you take the horses in the first place?" "She said, I don't know who said it, but they said that they were going to take 3 horses to the magic circle, right? Or were they going to leave them somewhere? But if they left the horses somewhere, wouldn't the demons, eat the horses?" Or maybe what they were referring to was they're going to go to the river, do the magic circle there, spend the night, then go back to the place, to the what they call glade, go back to the glade, and then take 3 horses. But that seems like such an, it doesn't make much sense, because if you leave the horses alone in the woods, aren't the freaking demons gonna kill them? And wouldn't it be better to just take them to the magic circle, or at least to a place closer to the magic circle? Well, let's see here. If their mounts are still there, right. Guin glanced quickly to both sides, then abruptly shot off in a new direction, guided by the instinct of a beast. If some fiend hasn't eaten those horses, we might just make it to Stavlos Keep before the storm. Rinda panted, trying to ignore the pain in her legs, which were threatening to cramp any moment now. She was breathing hard, but every time it seemed like the torch in Guin's hand was pulling farther away. She thought she could feel the breath of some strange and horrible thing on her neck, raising goosebumps on her skin. It's just Remus. And she would run harder. It's just Remus that's there, man. Remus caught her by the hand and tried to drag her along, but that just ended up slowing both of them down. It was no good. Rinda stumbled and emitted a quick yelp as she fell to the ground, when suddenly she felt herself being lifted high lightly into the air. "Guin, no! Put me down! Hold the torch steady, unless you want to be eaten," Guin howled in reply. "If the vampire vines come down, use the torch on them. Just don't let it go out." And the leopard man ran weaving through the trees toward the clearing. It was as though the darkness had bared its fangs at them. Whichever way they turned, countless crimson eyes glinted from the deep pools of shadow under the trees, and the night air was stirring, filled with the pulsing life of things that were not alive. Oh my god, the night is killing them. They're looking at them. Like, the only real threat so far has been these nothing really, because the gleaming eyes staring at you is not really a threat. So, oh my god, we're being pursued, we're gonna die, and it's just eyes staring at you. The clouds drifting across the sky moved faster, and the companion's last and reliable ally, the moon, vanished. The bluish-white light of the goddess Eris. "Eris, you're here! Oh my god, I can't believe this!" simply blotted from the sky. The moon vanished. The bluish-white light of the goddess Eris blotted from the sky. So the moon is Eris. Eris is the goddess moon. The moon goddess. Or the moon is a goddess called Eris. Man. "Go, child," howled Guin, stopping abruptly. "This is the place? You are sure?" "I think so, but then—" "Lift up the torch." Rinda was used to ordering people around and having her orders followed. To be issued an order, and in such a brusque manner, that was new to her. But there was something in the leopard-headed warrior's voice that made her listen, whether or not she wished to, and so Rinda did as she was told. Steeling herself, cringing in anticipation of a sight of strewn bodies and carnage everywhere, she thrust the torch out toward the clearing. He said to lift up the torch, and instead she threw it out. She thrust the torch out toward. She thrust out, so she didn't throw it, she just thrust. Then again. Remus gave a quiet gasp of surprise from where he stood, clinging to Guin. "They're gone. All gone." In the wavering light that spilled from their torch into the clearing, they could see the two vassia bushes with branches broken here and there, where the riders had ripped them apart looking for their quarry. Beside them on the ground were the black helmets, a broken broadsword, and bloodstains from the battle before. This was certainly the clearing where the riders had chased down the twins, where Guin had saved them. But where the corpses of the fallen riders should have been, there was nothing. The man that Guin had crushed with his hands, the man he had beheaded with a single swing of his broadsword, all were gone. There were no horses tied between the trees either, poking their noses into the grass or scratching the ground with their hooves in worried impatience. "Guin," said Rinda in a dry whisper. "They were eaten," said the warrior, his voice a solemn growl. "But Guin, what could ghouls, wolves, giant adders, maybe something else?" "Ah!" Rinda shut her eyes. With her feet and with her free hand, she grabbed onto Guin's leopard pelt as hard as she could. She felt as though some horror might emerge from the darkness any moment, but at the same time she was starting to feel that here with her arm around Guin's neck and her cheek pressed to the soft fur of his mane, they would be safe no matter what came. Guin, standing with the girl perched lightly on his shoulder, assessed their situation in the blink of an eye. They had lost the horses, and it was still a formidable journey to Stavlos Keep. The distance wasn't actually too great, but he wouldn't have bet on their chances of reaching the fortress before the storm hit, and no warrior, no matter how courageous, wanted to weather a storm in the marches. Even in the marches. Now, how do you know about the marches? Like the author here, the author here speaks as though this is Guin's thoughts somehow. You know, this is a tactic used by writers. It's like you explain things as though it is thought by a character, but not really. You know, it's like of an intervals, and it's in a middle place between those two. Now, it's like, you know, it's like, let's just look at this. Just analyze this. So Guin assessed their situation. See, so everything after this is Guin assessing the situation. So Guin assessed their situation. They had lost the horses. It was a formidable journey. The distance wasn't great, but no warrior wanted to weather a storm on the marches. So this is Guin's assessment of the situation. Now, Guin doesn't have much memory. So how does he know how a storm feels like in the marches? You know, how does he know what it is if he has no memory? He practically doesn't know who he is. How does he know how the marches are when there is a storm? So this is kind of a thing that doesn't make much sense here. You know, I think the author shouldn't have put all of this exposition text after Guin assessed the situation. You know, maybe she could have said, oh, the marches are a very bad place for warriors, and then Guin assessed the situation, instead of making this weird, disconnected thing here. Anyways, even in the marches, there were rules that governed the ways of spirits and men that laid down a clear line separating them. The storm would suspend those rules. The winds began to howl in rage, and the trees groaned and creaked. Then the three heard a fearful sound, like a woman's wail, trailing off into the distance, a sobbing shaitan. A sobbing shaitan? Or a mountain wolf? What the hell is a shaitan? No way. Is that like... Maybe that's like a... That's probably like a... You know, a made-up name, a proprietary name. Or a mountain wolf. Guin, Rima's voice quavered. There's something, I know. They are coming. The darkness grew thicker, slowly drawing in around them. It was a wet, unpleasant mixture of murk and shadow, and the only thing holding it at bay was the pitifully dim light of their torch, which now only barely succeeded at carving out a small patch of light from the darkness. Boy child, said Guin in a low growl, get behind me. Hold on to the belt beneath my cloak and move as I do. Girl, hold tight onto my neck. I am of flesh and blood. I am a living man. As long as I fight, they will not harm you. But if the storm comes, then we shall beg for Yarn's pity. Did he say that? He already learned everything. He already knows who Yarn is. If Guin said it, then he knows who Yarn is already. He's learning so too quickly for my tastes. Rinda, shaking, gripped the leopard mane as tightly as she could. While she had no idea what kind of past this man had buried in the valley of his lost memory, he seemed experienced in the world. Yes, finally you're addressing the elephant in the room, and he had managed to survive thus far while wandering alone and wounded in the marches. Ah, that explains things. That explains a lot. That explains a lot, but it's too late. It's too late, goddammit. That experience and his sword were all the twists of Paris had to rely on now. That experience and his sword were all the twins of Paris had to rely on now. The wind began to howl even louder. In the darkness, the three could feel the things hiding between the trees surrounding them, hateful eyes watching for any sign of weakness. Then suddenly, something approached with terrible swiftness, and Rinda screamed. Sliding from the darkness, flying directly toward them, was a thing with no arms, no legs, not even a body. It was a flying head, a hateful ghoul, swift, cold, and as pallid as chalk. Its bad fangs gnashed, lusting for warm blood and living flesh, and the ghastly spheres of its eyes reflected nothing as they roved. It flew through the air, trailing its spinal cord like a long, stringy tail, lunged at the warrior and sought to sink its teeth into Rinda. Wow, there's a spinal cord hanging from the freaking head. That's even like scarier than just the head. Just the head is like, okay, it's scary, but it's just a head. Now there's a freaking spinal cord hanging from it. Ah! Rinda slipped down Guin's shoulder. Guin hunched over to settle her firmly on his back, then grabbed the torch with his free hand and swung it at the ghoul. That's quite a lot of movements. If you think, if you recall what was happening until now, she was hanging onto his mane from his shoulder and holding the torch on her hand. Now she slipped down, he grabbed the torch from her hand, and he helped her settle on his back. It's a lot of movements. It's a lot of stuff. If this was an RPG, your turn would be done. Guin, you've used all your turn points. Now the enemy's gonna attack you. You're fucked. Then grabbed the torch with his free hand and swung it at the ghoul. The thing screeched out a deranged laugh, and the air filled with a vile smell of dead flesh burning. Its scorched eye oozing pus, the flying head sailed away and sailed away in the air, mocking them with its laughter as it disappeared into the darkness. "A ghoul," said Guin, switching the torch to his left hand and drawing his broadsword. "But that was just a head, taken from one of the riders, no doubt. They normally don't attack the living, but this one has grown bold. He must have feasted on the horses," Guin explained calmly. Then, all at once, he was shouting, "It comes again!" The ghoul had returned. The light of the torch shone on its clacking teeth and glistened off the child's skin on the side of its face, and then they could see beyond it. "Fiends!" shouted Guin, half cursing, half in warning. Out of the darkness behind the flying head came one, then two, then a dozen horrible things that once had been men. The riders had returned. It was a macabre procession. One walked without a head, another was split into two equal halves from neck to waist. The blood long since spilled onto the forest floor. A severed arm walked on lifeless fingers, following after a body that a great blunt weapon had beaten into a cruel caricature of the human form. "Wasn't that you, Guin? The terrible spirit denizen of the woods had animated these eerily familiar figures. The very black riders of Gora that Guin had fought. Stalking among them was the hulking shape of their captain, his head grotesquely twisted around to look backwards for all eternity, white bones showing where his throat should have been. These are all like... This is like sorrow from Metal Gear. This is like sorrow from Metal Gear Solid 3. It's like all the enemies you killed are now coming back to haunt you. Well. Behind him came the horses, not left but their skeletons, drifting along like pale white shadows. Between the storm-bent trees they came, creatures spawned of hell, writhing pale harbingers of misfortune. All were incomplete in some way. Lacking eyes to see or ears to hear, none could have had the full complement of five senses. Yet they needed them not. Other forces guided them. They stirred in utter silence, and from them came rippling waves of a hideous craving, an eternal starvation that ate away at their accursed bodies, a hunger that would not be sated no matter how much dead flesh they consumed. Their cold, burning desire was so strong it was tangible. Driven by an insatiable appetite, they attacked. Guin let loose a beastly howl, and the air around him shook with the force of it. Swinging the great sword, he cut down ghouls left and right, the well-honed blades splitting heads in half, freeing twisted necks from torsos, slashing through the skeletal horses as if cutting through butter. All the while he spun agilely. No way, my man. Agilely. No way. No way you actually use this word. No way, dude. No. You don't use that word. We don't talk about that word. We don't use it. We don't confirm its existence. We don't. All the while he spun with agility to protect the flaming torch on his left hand. That torch was their last hope of survival, and their enemies knew that all too well. Many of the ghouls were purposely seeking to dive past the blade to get at it, and so Guin danced, cutting down the creatures every time he turned. For their part, they kept shuffling forward with no regard for self-preservation. Making, what the fuck, you have, wow. Making his task a relatively easy one, though no more pleasant for that. Now let's take a look at the actual drawing here. Wow, interesting. The only monster drawn is like that ghoul head. Mostly what's featured here more prominently is Guin and the twins. That sword looks small. It's supposed to be like a broadsword. It's supposed to be. Is that a sword? I can't even. Dude, this is so like confusing. Such confusing drawing. If that is a sword, it's like way too small to be a broadsword. I don't know, man. I much prefer my imagination. I much prefer my imagination on this one. On this one, I prefer my imagination. But then, so what was really going on here? Oh yeah, they were coming and okay. But then, Guin roared. Accursed corpse eaters! There was a reason the ghouls made no efforts to protect themselves, for each time his sword cut through them, for each time his sword cut through a neck or a sliced torso sideways in half, the pieces would drop to the ground and draw back a short distance, oozing viscous goop but showing no other sign of discomfort. Then they would turn and attack him. Now 2 or 3 ghastly assailants, where once there had been only one. Guin. Rinda screamed in fear, holding on to the warrior for dear life as he dodged back and forth. A severed arm had come looping crazily through the air, and, avoiding both torch and sword, had latched onto Rinda's exposed shoulder. With a cry of disgust, she tried to pry off the cold fingers, but the arm clung fast to her warm skin like some horrible leech. "Get off me! Get off!" Hearing Rinda's screams, Guin switched the broadsword and torch to opposite hands in one swift motion. Now hold up, man. Oh man, he's juggling shit now. He's juggling swords and torches. He's juggling blades and fire. Oh my Nelly. He's juggling that shit in the middle of combat. In the middle of combat, he's juggling shit. Using his right hand to thrust the torch at the arm grabbing the girl. There was the horrible sound of flesh burning and blistering, and a moment later the arm dropped off its prey and fell into the bushes below. Rinda's arm was swollen and red where the thing had lashed on, as if it had been trying to suck the life from her. "Children!" Guin yelled to the twins as he continued slashing away ineffectively at the ever-advancing creatures. "Children, you must fight! Ah! I will count to 3. Why, though? Then I shall grab those branches there. You will take them and use them as torches. If you want to see the dawn, don't let the fire die." Now, first of all, it's not that easy to just pass the fire from one piece of wood to another. It's not that easy without any kind of, of obvious oil. And besides, on top of that, the wind is wet, so it would be even harder. The wood should be kind of wet, although not completely. Although it should have a bit of moisture to the wood, and that would make it even more difficult for the fire to pass from one piece of wood to the other. And on top of that, the fire would consume the wood very quickly, and it would, the wood would very quickly become charred and disintegrate in your hands. It's this amalgamation of factors that kind of create this impossible to suspend disbelief right now. It's kind of impossible. Like I said, this feels more like a satire than anything else. Alright, Guin, whatever you say, man. Ready? 1, 2, 3. On the count of 3, Guin threw the torch into the air. Oh, no way. No way. He's doing it again. He's doing it again. Then quickly bent and snatched up the... Oh my god, no way, dude. He couldn't just pass the torch to Rinda or frigging Remus. He couldn't just, "Hey, hold this for me, will ya, my man, while I freaking do my crazy shit." No, he needs to juggle everything. Oh my god. What are you fucking thinking? What are you thinking? He threw the torch into the air, quickly bent and snatched up the branches. Immediately, a disembodied head dripping foul humus and a blistered, burnt torso closed in, but the leopard warrior standing again caught the precious flame before they could steal it. With the torch and branches safely in his left hand, all of them, the torch and the branches, they're all in his left hand, all of them. What? What are you fucking talking about? Guin flicked the two fiends away with a sword in his right. Impossible. This is impossible. Now light them, he shouted, holding up the sticks. Rinda took them and lit them with the original torch. The original torch. The freaking juggled torch. Making 2 new torches. Oh well. Oh goody. Remus here got it. Now there were 3 torches blazing brightly. There were 3 plot torches blazing brightly through the plot obstacles, increasing our plot chances of survival, forcing back the plot darkness. Yet the plot ghouls around them, driven by a demonic thirst, showed no sign of retreating. No. Grabbing tightly onto the warrior's belt, Remus joined the fight, swinging his torch at the rotting corpse fragments advancing upon them. Well, no, I read that wrong. Remus joined the fight, swinging his torch at the rotting corpse fragments advancing upon them. That's better. My God, this book, it's insane right now. It's insanely unbelievable. Guin. On Guin's back, Rinda was holding up her new torch, but didn't dare swing it. Her voice was shaky and full of fear. What? A drop of rain on my cheek. The storm was coming. All around them, the ghouls were shuffling more quickly, a dark, gloomy kind of joy in their movements. They could hear the mocking laughter of coyotes in the distance, but the ghouls said nothing. Their mouths gaping silently, though the expectant rapture with which they licked their decaying lips became a kind of ripple in the air, flowing over the 3 in hostile waves. Great Janus, Rinda cried. If the rain puts out our torches, the ghouls will eat us for sure. Do not cast away hope, girl, said Guin, still fighting without sign of fatigue. Realizing that slashing at the fiends was a waste of time, he had changed his tactics, skewering them with the point of his broadsword and flinging them as far away as he could. Fight and hope. Are you not of the holy royal family of Paros? Guin, my hand is nearly numb. I cannot hold on much longer. Rinda's voice was thick with despair. She was clutching on to Guin's neck with all the strength she had left, but the weight of the torch in her other hand was too much. She felt as if she must drop it at any moment. Just then Remus screamed. He had been helping Guin bravely driving back the creatures with a burning stick, when some torso, already cut to ribbons, came flying in from above and swept his torch away. I got it! I got the torch! Fat drops of rain were hitting their faces now, and the ghouls pressed in even harder, ecstatic in the worsening weather. A violent wind blew through Rinda's hair, and Guin had to stop swinging his sword and draw back to protect his sputtering torch. Those ass, he roared. I know I've made it through worse than this, I'm sure of it. I just don't remember, but I'm sure of it. Guin looked, Rinda shouted. The strange ring of fear in her voice was so strong that for a second Guin forgot the danger they were in and turned to follow Rinda's pointing torch with his eyes. He gave a low growl of unpleasant surprise at what he saw. It was hard to believe. There, from amidst the jagged trees, came a full company of riders, their armor, cloaks, and helms so black that it seemed they had been formed out of the darkness itself. Even their horses wore black barding, with blinders on their eyes to keep them from startling. Hitting the horses' necks with short leather whips to urge them forward, the riders steadily advanced in 3 ordered columns. A search party from the keep, cried Rinda. Oh, Janus, we are finished! No, wait, Guin muttered. The 2 eyes of his leopard head shone bright with a wild hope. Just the opposite. This may be our only chance for survival. Look, I think the riders and the ghouls have noticed each other. The horses reared and shied, refusing to go any further.
None of the well-trained riders were thrown, but not a few. But not a few gave shouts of, "What the hell is this? This sentence!" None of the well-trained riders were thrown, but not a few gave shouts of fear. It's like, man, you're just trying to needlessly complicate stuff. Some, it's just some. None of the well-trained riders were thrown, and some gave shouts of fear and disgust when they saw the ghouls shuffling toward them. Simple. The fiends, rent, crushed, and cut into ribbons, squirmed like giant maggots from some pit of hell, their broken bodies growing ever more thirsty, ever thirstier for living, unspoiled flesh. "Look, the ghouls have found themselves a bigger meal than us," Guin growled, his shoulders heaving with every breath. "What were those riders thinking on a night like this with a storm coming in?" asked Rinda. "They bear the crest of Stavros Keep on their arms. You think they would be warier of the marches. They've strayed too far, searching for their comrades who never came home," said Guin. "If they were so unlucky as to have lost their way in the woodwood when night fell, then the pixie's trickery could have kept them going around in circles. But see there, they each have torches fixed to their saddles. These riders know what it means to wander in the marches at night." "Guin, look!" shouted Remus, clutching on to the leopard warrior's arm. The clearing, once eerily silent, was now filled with horrified screams and the brutal sounds of battle. "Look what? Look at what? I'm just hearing stuff. It's not look, it's hear. Listen. Hey, listen." The riders of Gora were accustomed to defending their land from the horrors of the marches, and they had come prepared to face ghouls, but there were too many, for they had divided and multiplied like some fiend of Nosferatu with each cut of Guin's blade. Once again, Guin is screwing everybody over. The result was catastrophic for the riders, who were still in close formation without enough room to properly swing their swords when a horde of flesh-craving ghouls flew into their midst. Darting past the blades to land on the riders' breastplates, the ghouls crawled relentlessly upward, questing for unprotected flesh. The riders fell from their horses, screaming and clawing at the decaying flesh of their assailants, but the ghouls fastened themselves like leeches to the bare skin of the riders' faces, suffocating their prey until the riders' strength gave way, and the monsters could feast undisturbed on the warm flesh. Rinda gasped in horror and hid her face behind Guin's shoulder. Several ghouls had grasped and sucked at the flesh of the screaming and struggling men until their faces caved in. Then, lusting for more, they disappeared into their victim's armor. Some riders jumped off their horses in a desperate attempt to save their fallen brothers in arms, but before they had gone more than a few paces, they were already fighting to save their own lives. "Guin, we have to save them." "No, of course not. Are you insane?" Are you retarded, my boy?" "Dude, what the hell? Are you fucking insane?" Remus, the boy, had refused to cover his eyes like his sister Rinda, but now he was fighting back nausea as he stood trembling at Guin's side. "Foolish motherfucker," replied Guin. "Are they not the enemy come to capture you? It's our luck that the ghouls are so taken with them. Indeed, we should be trying to escape now, though I wouldn't give us very good odds of living to see the morning if we ran into the depths of the forest now. If only the riders can hold out until the first rays of..." He's like, "Let these fuckers fight. We just stand here and watch. Hopefully they will kill each other and then we will escape." Which is very sensible. It's the right thing to do. Completely. Suddenly Guin interrupted himself with a howl so loud that Remus jumped back and screamed, and even Rinda shook. "Guin? I am a fool! Yeah!" Indeed you are. Guin? Have you lost your mind?" The warrior turned his leopard head skyward and cursed loudly. "How could I have forgotten about the corpse-eater's cursed nature? The very thing that created our peril in the first place. They eat the flesh of beasts and men, then take the bodies for their own. Once they possess the bodies of the new riders as well, and remember us, we are lost. Guin, I cannot possibly stand against so many until the morning." "Nah, yarn in his wisdom," shouted Guin, thrusting both his powerful arms into the air in a gesture that seemed both prayer and a curse. But he did not stand there long. Suddenly the leopard warrior was a blur of movement. Guin, what are you doing?" Rinda yelped in fear. Guin shouted over his shoulder, "Children, give me your torches. I need them back now.
What are you doing? You'll start a brush fire. A brush fire? A brush fire? Isn't it bush fire? What is going on with the world? What is going on with the world? What are you doing? You'll start a brush fire. We'll all burn. Better than having the living blood sucked out of us by those ghouls, the leopard man exclaimed, ignoring Linda's warning and thrusting the torch he had snatched from her hand into the underbrush. Now burn! Michael, god of fire, Dagon, god of wind, lend me your strength. Now burn, cursed forest, burn! The lush leaves and branches resisted Guin's blazing assault for a while. But before long there was a faint crackling sound, followed by the orange glow of flames quickly spreading through the undergrowth. A wave of panic rippled through the dark forest. Small birds that had been asleep in the tree branches burst forth from their roosts, and grass snakes hissed as they slithered frantically away from the blaze. Panic spread among both the Goran riders and their ghoulish foes. The ghoulish fools! Fool, you fool! Soon the fire lit a wide area, bringing false day to the clearing. In a few short moments, the rule of the night was turned on its head, and the horrible flesh-eating demons quaked and hurried to escape, leaving their still-living prey on the ground. The flames leapt higher and brighter still, scorching the sky, sending the ghouls dancing in circles in a mad flight for safety. Guin, the heat! There's no way out! It's spreading too quickly! The twins of Paros yelled over the crackling of the flames. Guin stood unmoving as some great statue. I'm ready to die. His hands at his waist, his entire body bathed in the light of the brush fire. His cloak flowed out behind him, blown by the hot wind that rolled out from the flames. Standing there, a giant, surrounded by the whirling ghouls and the riders that had been transformed into living torches by the forest blaze, Guin was like half-beast god, filled with a life force that shone clear and iron strong. Rinda's voice caught in her mouth and she swallowed hard. Once again, she's admiring Guin. And once again, the author is like, oh, Guin is like a half-beast god. Surrounded by fire, the ghouls scattered and shriveled, screaming horrible things that were not words. Horrible things that were not words. Like the riders, they milled about helplessly, animated torches that did not burn out, but instead shrank and melted away like ice thrown into a fire. Their screams of pain and curses drowned out even the crackling of the flames and the howling of the wind. And Linda and Remus couldn't but join them in screaming as the wildfire blew through their hair and singed their skin. Then Guin moved. Where only a moment before he had stood like a carven monument to some deity, the leopard-headed warrior now leapt into action, scooping up one of the twins of Paros in each of his powerful arms. Come, children, he howled, running back up the path in the direction from which they had come, evading the fire he had created. The fire had become a conflagration, burning into the heavens and overwhelming night with a fierce red mimicry of day. Guin wove between and pushed aside the other fleeing denizens of the wood, running tirelessly until he found what he had been searching for, the root spring. This blaze should keep the nixies from any mischief, the leopard man growled as he plunged into the pool, not pausing to give the twins a chance to protest from their awkward position clutched beneath his arms. You're drowning them. He kept going until even their heads were entirely under water. Tongues of flame sputtered and crackled at the edge of the spring. Already? Damn, this fire was big, almost as though the fire was enraged at the narrow escape of its intended prey. Even the fire is out to get us. The rootwood had lain silent for thousands of years, nurturing dark life in its hollows. But it was silent no longer, as the fire invaded the wood, raging as if covetous of the forest's heart itself. Children? Did you stop breathing? Why? How did that happen? For what reason? Guin's feline head, soaked and dripping, was the first to emerge from the water. Children, do you still live? No, you killed us, you bastard. Two small heads, water pouring from platinum blonde hair. Two small heads, water pouring from platinum blonde hair, emerged on either side of the giant leopard face. Linda spit out a mouthful of water, her teeth chattering as she replied, We've certainly been better, but yes, we're alive. Guin looked around them. It was a wasteland. the destruction wrought by the fire and the signs of battle stretched around them on all sides. The trees stood blackened and charred, and the underbrush had been reduced to little more than ash. The burned sward was unbelievably wide, giving a clear view across the countless stooped skeletons of half-burned trunks. Seeing no immediate sign of danger, Guin strode from the spring and then violently shook himself, spraying water all around him, just like some great cat might after a swim. Once again, is he a man or is he a beast? I'm getting real tired of your antics, author. After shaking his head to cast off the last few drops of water, Guin stretched out his hands to pull the twins up from the spring. Brother and sister clutched onto his arms as he lifted them out of the water, thoroughly soaked and bedraggled? Now, this word, I've never seen this word in my life. Bedraggled or bedraggled? Bedraggled makes more sense than bedraggled. Thoroughly soaked and bedraggled. That makes a little bit more sense. Let's just search for its meaning just in case. Bedraggled. Bedraggled. Dirty and disheveled. Dirty and disheveled. Okay. I've never seen it before. Soaked and bedraggled. Teeth chattering with cold. Though they could barely stand, the children's first act was to look at each other and hug. Beyond the blackened husks of trees, they could faintly see the phantasmal bluish outline of a range of mountains. Over them, there, came the first glint of brilliant sunlight. Dawn had come at last, and a welcome sight it was. And if perhaps it did not shine as brightly as it is said to have in the days of old, to the twins its blessed rays seemed to be full of an enchanting warmth. "We made it. We're alive," whispered Linda, still hugging her brother tight, her voice half disbelief, half pure joy. "The air is so sweet, and what a bright morning." "The storm saved us, and twice at that," said Guin. "The wind spread the fire that rescued us from the flesh-eaters of the forest, and the rain put out the fire at just the right moment, or the spring water would have boiled, and we would have burned along with the ghouls and riders. It was a good bit of luck. We can't count on being so fortunate in the future." "I think you can. It's 100 volumes. I think you're gonna have plenty of luck. I wonder if anyone at Stavros Keep saw the fire. I don't think they could have missed it, a blaze that big, and besides, they lost at least 2 squads of riders to it," said Guin. "They will wait for the last patches of fire to burn out before sending a search party, by which time we should be long gone. But before that, you children need to dry off those clothes." Guin wrung out his cloak as he talked, dripping water onto the ashy lip of the spring. "And we need to eat, else we'll not have the strength to evade any kind of search, head start or no. Thankfully, the largest oven in the marches has just finished roasting a grand feast for us. Yeah, just be careful not to eat the demons by mistake." "Oh, I'm eating this delicious meat." "Wait, you're eating a zombie." "No! No!" My, Rinda stared indignantly at Guin for saying such a thing. But when she saw the leopard-headed warrior standing there, looking more than ever like the half-beast god Kerenus, his outlandish features golden yellow in the morning sun, she swallowed her objections and joined him in looking through the ashes and tree husks for small beasts that might have been caught in the nice blaze. After they saw Guin pick up his first catch and thrust it into his maw, savory-looking juices dripping from the meat, the twins lost any inhibitions. I would have lost all appetite. I lost all appetite. They lost any inhibitions they might have had and began searching and eating in earnest. It's all burned, isn't it? Like, it's all burnt meat. Like, it doesn't taste any good at all. It's all burnt. My Nelly. "So, what do we do now?" asked Rinda, licking her fingers with satisfaction after they had filled their stomachs. "Oh, vegans! Vegans are utterly disgusted by this. Vegans, this is your trigger warning for vegans. Empty since yesterday and shaken off the cold of the water." "A good question," replied Guin, shaking his head. "I must go in search of myself. Ah!" That much is clear. I need to know who I am, why I wear this mask, and whatever this aura is. And us? Linda and Lemus looked at each other, but before they could say anything else, the leopard-headed warrior's rueful laughter cut them off.
Regardless of what we want to do, the order of the day is survival. I can hear a few dozen pairs of hoofbeats coming this way, a welcome party from the keep. It would seem that our time for deliberations is limited indeed.
And that's the end of chapter 1. It was subdivided into 1, 2, and 3. So I was thinking, oh, are these chapter 1, 2, and 3? No, this is just they are just, subdivisions. They're just subdivisions, 1, 2, and 3. But that was the entirety of chapter 1. It was like 80 pages. Man. I don't know about it. I mean, it has very interesting concepts. It truly does. I mean, that's really like, it's really apparent that it has some very distinctive features, especially for something, I believe this was published originally in like 1979 or something. It has some very interesting concepts and some very neat ideas and an interesting world building, although, nothing has really happened yet to show us that, but we already have a few glimpses of, probably these kingdoms are at war, this Goran and this other, the kingdom of the Farseer or something. It's interesting, but it also feels like a satire at times due to how cliche some things are, how completely unbelievable some things are. And I mean, it's fantasy, and obviously ghouls and vampire vines don't exist, and magic circles don't exist. Obviously it's a fantasy world, but that is trying to be as realistic as possible, but not really. Not really. So there's this juggling shit. That was way too much juggling. We still don't understand how the mask works fully. Like, where is his mouth inside that mask? How can he not be able to drink something when it, to me, it seems as simple as just pouring down the mask, just pouring the water down the mask. It seems simple as that. I don't know if I'm gonna keep reading. Maybe not. I really don't know. I liked a few things, but there were some things that were just too hard to swallow. There were some things that were just, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like this is a story that I've seen before hundreds of times, because it uses so many cliches that I feel like I've seen it 100 times now. So it's like, even though, yes, for the time, this was probably something very new, very distinctive, and very, very unprecedented, even though this might have been very unprecedented for its time, right now, I've seen 100 more. I've seen like almost 500 probably works just like this that reuse the same cliches and that try to tell a similar story in a similar way. And I don't know. There are some things about it that are a bit irritating to me. Some story elements that are a bit irritating to me. But I don't know. I'll have to think about it. I'll have to think if I'm gonna keep reading this or not. It was interesting though. It was very informative. Very interesting to see what exactly is the Guin Saga. This is the Guin Saga. This is what it is. It doesn't matter what happens, doesn't matter what it influenced, what it becomes, what it does in the future. Nothing matters. All that matters is that this is the real Guin Saga. And that's how it is, for better or worse. So that's it. I'm out of here.